Okay, so we are talking about crickets, and I'll share who I am, what I do in a bit. Yeah, killing crickets with adoption and enablement. I'm really excited to talk about this. It's the first time I've kind of put all of these thoughts in one talk. So let me know. We're talking specifically about dashboard adoption and enablement today, but I have time left, I think, to, if you have any questions around from a center of excellence, adoption and enablement, I'm super happy to field those questions as well. I love the work I do. Let me just kind of introduce who I am. I have this word cloud here. I don't use them that often, but I decided to use it for this. So yeah, I'm an accessibility advocate. I think part of kind of my ethos is that I don't believe one person deserves more than the other in terms of their right to be able to do certain things. So from that perspective, accessibility and data visualizations or data experiences is really important to me, because you never know who that person is that needs to be able to experience your dashboards. I'm a pageant person. I've actually just competed in one, and I've got another one coming up towards the end of the year. It's a really interesting way to empower myself and others. And I'm a marketing fanatic, which I think you'll be able to see as we go through this deck. I'm a former bank examiner and a coffee lover. Right now I'm sipping on some iced coffee. And really just not on the slide deck here, but just to kind of get my, like, this, who are you? Why do you know to talk about this stuff? When I was in the public sector as a bank examiner and made the switch, I had the experience to lead a reporting and analytics team there, and really found Tableau and became engaged in the community in 2013. It was really interesting to me and I loved it, but it was kind of like my hobby. And then after I left the OCC back in 2018, I started my own business doing lead generation quizzes, but I also taught Tableau and data visualization. So I developed my own curriculum. I ended up working as a subcontractor, delivering some Tableau training as well. And I loved it. And one of the things I remember telling Anna was, look, I can deliver this training, but they have they have some like fundamental questions that they need to they've got to get some things in place here, because training will only get you so far. And I talked about how it would be really neat to do some Tableau enablement work, because just like learning about it isn't enough. And then the opportunity at Red Hat came available, because I was like, well, I've never seen Tableau Enablement Consultant as a job before. And this is everything that I've done in the community. Anna mentioned a couple of things with the Vizzies, the Tableau Wannabe podcast. Now it's called Tableau World Podcast. I founded the Tableau Fringe Festival. So, and I had blogged for, 4 years, pretty straight, pretty consecutively, like month over month, and then turned that to podcasting. And now I kind of get back into blogging every once in a while, but I had done all of this work that I absolutely loved. And now at Red Hat, I kind of get paid for it, which is really awesome. So that's been my journey to where I am today from a business perspective. But when it comes to dashboards and adoption and, the work that you do to put into it, I feel like you're like so proud of the work that you do. You don't want to put it out there and just hear crickets, right? Like the chirp of silence is awful. So what are some ways, how can you ensure that the dashboards that you're putting out there are adopted, that people know how to use them, that they are successful? It's a struggle. Depending on how your organization is set up, depending on how you work and others work, you can be on the struggle bus, and it's a real issue. So as I go through some of these points that I'm going to cover today, it's just from one perspective. And what I would love for you to do as you think about these things, or as I'm talking about them, one, think about like, how can, am I doing this? Number one, because you might be already doing this, so it might be great validation for you. Secondly, like, okay, your organization may not work this way, but how could you take some of these points and incorporate them into your own working environment? So I acknowledge that it's easy sometimes to put it on paper and harder to like put it in practice, but it is a worthwhile exercise to go through that. So when it comes to dashboard adoption, if a dashboard is published and no one uses it, does it even exist? I think the answer to that is no, except it takes up server or space on Tableau Cloud. And here's why I say that. I was involved, it was like my first Tableau project ever. So, you know, like I'm already nervous. And it was the first one in my agency where we had to actually like marry data sources together, because prior to that, like individual reporting systems had been used. I mean, we were marrying people data with some examination, like people data with examination data. It was the whole thing. We finally got it out there. The actual story behind it is very traumatic because there were a lot of lessons learned from it. But we finally got it into a place, and it was right around the time I was moving into a managerial position. So I was told to hand it off to one of my direct reports, which I did. And then he became responsible for finishing it out, you know, refining it and maintaining it. And he worked with the business person to get it going, to like, you know, take it the last mile, which was fine. But then that business person left. She retired, I think. And a couple of years later, I saw this guy down in the hallways, and I was like, "Oh, hey, Tim." I'm like, "How is that dashboard? You know, I'm so curious. Like, do people use it? Like, have you changed it?" He was like, "Oh, you know, like I don't really hear anything about it." I'm like, no news is good news, right? And I'm like, "Huh, okay." And I knew that there was like a chart in there that, like, I mean, first dashboard, first workbook, major project, this chart was awful. So I knew that that chart needed to be redone. And I was like, "Did you change the circle chart?" "Oh no, that's still in there." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so fast forward a little bit, and I'm having a conversation with some leaders. And they said, "You know, what we really want to do is measure commitments between business lines." And I was like, "Oh, we already have that." And so they were going into like solutioning it. I'm like, "No, we already have that. It's in this resource allocation workbook. It's on Tableau server." What? Now, these are people who should be in the audience for that. Like they have access to it. And I'm like, why don't they know about it? As it turns out, the reason why Tim didn't hear anything about this dashboard or this workbook was because people weren't using it, to the point where people didn't even know it existed anymore. So there was definitely an adoption and an enablement issue because people were not using it. And I think back and I'm like, oh my gosh, this was such a mountain of work to do. Like this was like, it was 2000, like 10 or 11 when we put this together. So I don't even know what version that was. It was before they started naming it by years. It was a lot of work and a lot of things that we had to hack because Tableau didn't do it natively. So like, I just think about all of that work that was wasted, what feels like wasted. And that really bummed me out. So I never want any of my work I don't want that to happen to my work, and I don't want it to happen to others as well. So how can you prevent against that? Well, I came up with this concept called UAM squared. I wasn't fancy enough to like actually do the little like 2 as a squared, but UAM 2 squared. You could also call it the cricket killer. And it's really around understanding, awareness, marketing, and monitoring. And if you remember, I'm a marketing fanatic, so this kind of plays into that. What it really gets to is the first part of it in understanding is knowing your audience. And this isn't just knowing your audience from my requirements to build out the dashboard. It's really knowing them. How do you reach them? How what are they like? Are they high touch people? Do they need personal attention, or are they low touch? Could you just hit publish, send them a link, and you're good to go? Is this somebody that like people are excited, and they are so excited that they're going to take it on and help you evangelize this dashboard? Or do you need to provide them a little more support to get them excited and start talking about it? Go back to, why is this dashboard important? Like, you know, it's the WIFM. What's in it for me? Well, what's in it for the person using the dashboard? Are people running away from pain or going towards pleasure? That's a concept in sales and market, well, sales in particular, where people are motivated a lot of times by avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. So seeking something good. So what is this dashboard going to do? And you may think, well, Emily, I mean, it's not like it's not like this dashboard's gonna like take them to an island with like, I don't know, a floaty and like fun drinks. No, it won't, but are they going to be able to recognize revenue from it? Is it gonna make their life easier? Because what you can start to do then, and we'll talk about this a little bit in the marketing section, is start using that point here of like, are they running away from pain or going towards pleasure? You can use that in your messaging. And we'll talk about that a bit more. And has this been discussed in the business? So has this dashboard that you've been working on, has it been discussed in the business? And how was it discussed? Was it an edict? Like, we are moving from X to Y and we all will be using this? Edicts, you know, I guess they can work for some people, but not everybody's going to be happy about it. So there may be some resistance. So how can you help overcome some of that resistance? Or is it been talked about like a new tool is coming out and it's going to help us do this, so automatically people are getting excited about it? Or have there been crickets? Like, there really hasn't been any discussion about it. That means you might have to do a little more work. So, but understanding this information is super helpful. Also identifying, who is your dashboard influencer? This is the person who can help influence others' behaviors to get them to use this dashboard. So I would say my last job before I left the public sector, I was I was an office analyst, but I helped manage a portfolio of banks, large banks. And people would come to my position as a deputy controller analyst to help influence my boss or our bosses for that level. So I was the influencer because they knew that I'd be able to help make my boss aware, talk about like the benefits of using this. So that's a lot of times what would happen is that we would be presented at my level dashboards, we'd give feedback, but then we'd also talk about like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this dashboard that's going to help us identify risk, or it's going to help us identify how many people we used last year to implement strategy. And so then our bosses were more likely to use it. So who is your dashboard influencer? And then this is probably the biggest one. Have you created a user-centered dashboard? I've been fangirling a bit because I did go to TC and I saw Keith Dykstra's talk. Keith Dykstra and Kendra Allen-Spock, I think her name is, from Interworks, developed this talk, which is amazing. And it talks about user-centered dashboard and how that can help with adoption. And so is your dashboard designed in a way, is it designed for them? Is it designed in a way to give the audience what they need in an intuitive way? If it's meant to provide insights, does your dashboard actually provide insights? Basically, does it do what it's intended to do and works for the person? Those dashboards that are user-centered are more likely to be adopted and used because they have the user in mind. And Keith and Kendra have an amazing talk. I like really highly recommend it. They just spoke at our Red Hat Global Tug the other day. So moving on from understanding. So then we move into awareness. So like people, you may have an understanding, people may or may not know about this dashboard. So going back to this resource allocation workbook, we have people that didn't know about it. Now, how aware is your audience of this dashboard? Is it a redesign? So this is really just an improvement. So they already know about the old and now they can learn about the new. Is it totally new? What, if anything, has been communicated about it? Has somebody from the business been talking about it? Was somebody from the audience involved in the development process? Does everybody who needs to know about it actually know about it? And, one of the things here is, like, if your organization is set up so that you're the developer and then there's somebody in the business, like, how would you know this? So much of this gets to communication. I have, like, if you've seen this underlying thread, this is really about communication. Are you communicating? Ask these questions. Like, hey, I would say, hey, I'm super excited about this. I'm so excited about this dashboard. I know it's going to make massive impact. What can I do to support you getting the message out? Because we're both, as developer and as the business person, the SME, we are both invested in this. This dashboard is an investment. And the way that I look at things is I want to maximize my investment, and the business person should too. So we covered understanding, we've covered awareness, now the marketing piece, which is probably my favorite. What would make this dashboard a success? Do you know that? Sometimes we have developers, or there are developers that get into the, head down, I'm playing in Tableau, I'm going to put together this dashboard and here you go. And it's like, develop dashboard, publish it, develop, publish, develop, publish, develop, publish, without necessarily thinking or like really sitting with what will make this successful. If you know what makes this successful, you can create some messaging around that. Get testimonies or business impact stories. What is the value that this dashboard brings? And so you could say, well, Emily, if I'm developing it, how would I do that? Well, get a beta tester, get one of your testers to show, like, to write a little blurb of, I can see this making a big impact. This will allow us to identify our opportunities much quicker than we had before. I'm also, like, low-key slightly obsessed with business value book and that process, because our work should be adding value and we should be doing the things that are valuable. So, and that's also great when you need to put it on your accomplishment reports as well. Whole dashboard tours. That's another way you can market these dashboards. So in that tour, which is a webinar or a meeting, who's this dashboard for? Who's the primary audience? Where can people, or like, talk about the data, where people can find the dashboard? Is it embedded? Is it on Tableau Online or cloud? Navigate through the dashboard, show them what they need to know to make it a success. And then talk about the transformation. It's not about the dashboard. The dashboard is a vehicle. Like, I think about it like, like we had this before, maybe the before is like the continental US, and the dashboard is the plane, and the after, where people really want to be, is that beautiful island or that beach or mountains or whatever. The dashboard is the vehicle. And so you talk about the transformation. You can go from hours to get the data, to put it together, to seconds to get your information. And so seconds, okay, but that's not enough. You got to think about the so what. Quicker time to decisions could impact, like, how I use my time. It could even be the feeling, like, I feel frustrated. The before is, I feel frustrated that it takes me so freaking long to get this data, to I feel happy, I feel confident, I feel like I am productive and efficient when I use this dashboard, because I know that it has solved a problem, it's giving me trusted data, whatever the case may be. That feeling, like, we're talking to people, so tapping into those feelings is completely appropriate, even when we're talking about data. So that's something that when we're messaging, and just kind of like a side note from dashboard adoption, When we launched VizCity, which is our internal training program, we talked about how people didn't know where to start. Some people didn't know where to start with training. There were so many resources out there. They felt overwhelmed. So now they know the transformation of going from overwhelmed, confused, unsure. Now they feel confident. They feel certain. They have this feeling of certainty. They know where to go and how to get started and can start using Tableau and learning about it immediately. So tapping into those feelings is also a great way to message out about your dashboards. I could talk about marketing forever though. How else can you market this? Well, whether it's from a center of excellence perspective or even a business group perspective, like finance, for example, or people, include it in your newsletter. So if your newsletter goes out to people who have access to the dashboard in particular, that's great. Like blast it, launch it. It's a major improvement. It's something that will add value to their lives. You want them to know about it. Embed or link it to your intranet page, like take it right to them. I am like super into bringing dashboards to people, not having people go to dashboards. And I think when we do that, it allows those dashboards to be a part of their interactions throughout the day. So it just becomes a part of their work instead of this event of like going to Tableau online or server or whatever. So bring it to them where they can see it. And then tap into your influencers. Who can drive change? How can they help drive adoption? And for some of you, this may be like, look, my job is really just to develop. It's not all of this other stuff you're talking about, but you want to have your time be used wisely. You want these things to be a success because your name is also associated with it. So how do you even talk about this with somebody who's in the business doing, who should be doing this work? Well, how can you support them? Have that conversation with them. Look, I want us to maximize the investment in this dashboard. So like, what can we do together? How can I support you? And that will be really helpful. And as part of that, we have the last M, which is monitoring and make changes. So you can check your dashboard views. Who are the top end viewers? Who are the bottom end viewers? Can you reach out to them and ask them, what are some things that make their life easier? What are some things that they would like to see? You can use this through admin insights on Tableau Cloud. And I think that there's a similar kind of dashboard on server. And that's a great source of information to learn more about how your dashboard's being used. Like we have the data, we have the dashboard, we need to check it. And I'm guilty of this sometimes. We have this data, we need to make sure we're not just collecting it, but actually using it. So how can we use this to go back and help support our users? You can always check in with your users. Remember Tim, and no news is good news, and that's not always the case. And then make feedback easy. Email buttons in your dashboards, Google Forms, GChat, Teams, Slack, make that part of your dashboard, links to those, but make that feedback process easy for them. And then make changes based on that feedback and promote changes. That helps instill trust and credibility, and also helps with like relationship building because you're listening and then taking action. So going beyond one dashboard, from like, if I think about enablement at scale, one of the ways that you can help people is, especially if you're doing COE-like activities, do some viewer training, help them feel comfortable and confident in getting the information that they need. A lot of times, sometimes people may go to a dashboard and say, well, this isn't what I need. Like, I need a different view of this data. Okay, cool. Like filter and custom view, right? But they may not know how to do that. So provide that training. I love this. I love this feature that we have where it's like an internal YouTube. So we put that training up there on our internal YouTube, and then we link to it, and it's available for all of the business users to be able to get to help them. So they're leveraging our work that we're doing to help them communicate with their viewers, and post it on your internal sites as well. And then shout out awesome work. Shout it out in newsletters and team meetings and town halls. I saw a dashboard the other day in a town hall that I had a data doctor session with this person who was demoing it. And the demo went really well, but encourage your people to do that. And then provide your developers these cricket killer ideas. So when you forget to kill a cricket, also known as I have crickets, AKA everything else you talked about was cool, Emily, and all, but my work environment isn't like that. So send an email and book time on the calendar for feedback and business impact. This 2-for-1 allows you to keep them involved and create ownership. Like if you're asking, hey, I'd really love to get some feedback on this dashboard, you may hear crickets from them. Like they may not respond to your email because they're so busy. So generally what I do, especially this is how I worked with business impact or business value, was sent them an email and said, hey, I'm going to be setting up some time with you to talk about business value. Or, hey, I'm going to be setting up some time. I've put them on notice. Then I create the event, the appointment on their calendar. And that's where you can go through and talk about feedback. And that's helpful. It also keeps them engaged if you're working with a particular person from the business. Setting up feedback sessions to check in and nurture. There are 3 types that you can do. One is an interview where you're just asking them questions. Observation, which is the best, like have them drive and tell you what they're doing, what they expect, what they like. And having asynchronous feedback. So they provide the feedback, then you respond with questions and you go back and forth. And then the other thing you can do, and you want to do this in such a way that it's not burdensome. And I'm actually trying to work through, after going through our business value book process, kind of how we can do this very, a lightweight way of doing this, but get them to provide a picture on the before and after. Did the dashboard increase revenue? Did it cut expenses? Did it make life work more efficient, easier? That before and after picture is the basis of business value. So have them kind of provide you that. And then what would make their life easier with the dashboard, going through user feedback sessions. And all of that will help you iterate to make it more valuable, but give you a really nice picture of the value it provides. And that's not just a data point, but also a really great way of saying, hey, this dashboard does have value. By the way, if your people aren't using it, they're missing out. And you can key in on some of those reasons why it made life better. So a few takeaways, create user-centered dashboards. Keith Dykstra and Kendra Allensbach have a great talk on this. Create ownership. They are invested in this work. They invested in it and they need to maximize that investment. Implement this concept of UAM squared for your dashboards and celebrate successes because that's always super good to do. And if you would love to, I'd love to connect with you. I love connecting with folks and talking about accessibility, Center of Excellence, enablement, training, all of that good stuff. You can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, you can ask them now or later. So that's it for me and kind of on time-ish.
Thank you. Oh, and I built my timer. Anna, you're on mute.
That is totally what I did. You know what? The dog keeps barking and I keep muting myself. So there's that. So what I was saying, Emily, thank you so much for that. I'm in the world of, hey, I need to get buy-in from business users and I want things to be their idea, not just my idea, you know. So these are great tips for that.
Yeah. And I mean, there comes a time where you may have to educate, like, you know this, Anna, but you know, you may have to educate them. You may have to come up with the ideas, like at least to plant the seed, but then like give them something like a conversation piece or a point, and then like have them react and go forward with it. But either way, like it's their investment, whether they're investing money because you're using cost center accounting or because they're investing time in working with this. So it's an investment, maximize it. It's not a very sexy thing, but it's an important thing.
I love what you said in the very beginning, Emily, where you were talking about like if you build a dashboard and nobody uses it, it's like, you know, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, like, did you really build anything at all? Like, it's so true, right? Like, because the goal of what we do at the end of the day is to create an impact, and we want people to make better decisions based off of better information. And I'm gonna talk about a little bit of this in a minute, but like, I love like everything you said resonated. So
Thank you. And
And it
was,
is.
Okay.
by the way, I was distraught when I learned that people weren't using it because it was such a massive ordeal. Like,
Sure.
I mean, it was such a big deal, like getting this done, and then to have nobody use it. Like, I got a special accommodation for it. Like, that's how big of a deal it was. And then for nobody to use it, I was like, oh my God, like all of that effort that we went
you
through.
knew what had gone into
It
this.
is so disheartening, yeah, when your dashboard,
Yeah.
you look at the views and no one's viewing them, and then they're like asking questions like, I did this, and I put my work into it, and it's not going anywhere.
Rocky asked the question, is anybody using a dashboard catalog to make it easier for users to shop and learn to use dashboards? We have thought about something like that, and now we're trying to figure out how, like, what would that look like for us? So I'd be curious as to whether people are using something like that and how it works.
Yeah, I
We've-
would too. This is interesting to me.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of that.
I have to find it. There's a university that does this really well, and it's a Tableau dashboard that is a catalog of dashboards. And when you click on it, it takes you to, so that one's on their public site. And when you click it, it takes you to the server site. And then if you have access, you have to sign in. But then everyone can see every dashboard, and they can say like, hey, I think I need access to this. And I'm gonna have to find that university because it's awesome. And they said it like completely drove utilization for their dashboards.
Mhm. We
So-
do
so
have,
I-
sorry,
I-
Nelson, go ahead.
I was gonna say I've built those in the past, and I've done it specifically for like executive audiences, but general, like also broad teams. And one of the cool things that we did with it was we made it so that if you were an executive, you only saw like these, and if you were like, if you were in finance, you only saw these and so forth, and it also ranked them and so forth. Like we were tapping on all sorts of data that is inside of the PostgreSQL database, and we were also using the REST API to pull thumbnail images, and it was pretty slick.
Mhm.
So it's definitely doable, but it's you have to be very intentional about it. And the other thing, if you do one of those, like what we did is basically made a Tableau dashboard. You can actually make it so that every user, instead of going to the landing page in Tableau, that their opening screen when they go onto the server is that dashboard. And so that's like the key piece of the whole thing, is to basically force everybody into making that, or you make it for them, but that becomes their landing page rather than the home screen of Tableau server.
Nelson, is
also a
there
way,
a
like,
blog post on this?
That should be written about. The client we did it for is a very secretive one, so I can tell you the stories, but I can't show you the pictures.
I was gonna say, I also recommend like, this is a simple tip, but on server, at least sort the views or the workbooks by number of favorites, just so that like up at the very top are the, workbooks that people use, the most common, the most used. One thing I feel like that makes it hard for adoption is just people get overwhelmed. Do y'all
Yeah.
ever hear that? They just get overwhelmed by the sheer volume and the disparities sometimes in like, if you have a bunch of developers in the company, you may have some lower quality or ones that people maybe don't necessarily trust in the same way as the, really well done workbooks by your more senior people. So that would be one way. And you could also set that as like the default where people come out there and up at the top is the most used.
That's why I'm kind of in love with this idea of bringing the dashboards that people need when they need them into their daily experience, because then they don't have to worry about, like, you always have access. So we use Tableau Cloud. You always have access to cloud, and you're only going to have access to the content. We use LDAP groups to help manage permissions.
Mhm.
So you're only going to have access to the content you have access to. But when you bring it into your daily life, then it's like, oh, it's just like part of how I do my business on a daily basis. So that's a strategic initiative or a priority for us. So It hasn't been implemented yet, but that's something I am completely obsessed with.